Hi everyone, this is Jessica Williams, candidate for the Master of Education in Globalization and Educational Change at Lehigh University. Today I'm going to introduce to you the field of Comparative and International Education, also known as CIE. Although CIE hosts a wide range of benefits and insight for those studying educational policy, teacher education, or global affairs, unfortunately it hasn't been well publicized in the media. So let's begin. Okay, so one of the most pressing issues of the field is the definition of the field itself and the need to distinguish it from other fields, which is kind of weird, huh? According to Wiseman and Matherly, 2009, professionalization of a field of study requires expert knowledge, training and credentials, self-policing and ethical codes, occupational domain, and the workplace. Scholars and practitioners of the field work in many different occupations and environments, and the training required for the field is not set in stone. All of this makes it difficult for the professionalization of the field. It's also complicated by the fact that the field draws on many methods and theoretical frameworks that are essential to other fields. As you can see in the diagram, comparative and international education shares methods and theoretical frameworks with fields such as anthropology, sociology, political science, and economics. So a criticism of comparative and international education is that it's not characterized by anything that's unique to the field. But on the other hand, this flexibility makes it easier for those interested in the field to make a career change and contribute. Since this is an ongoing issue, I'm going to attempt to define the field as best as I can. So comparative education and international education have often been described as twin fields. One is considered academic, while the other is more practical. On the left, we have comparative education, known as the academic side. Comparative education has roots in area studies, and it's a field in which two or more educational systems are compared in order to understand educational phenomena and explain how they vary. Comparative education began around the 19th century, and from the literature we can see that its uses pretty much appealed to those who were considered concerned with economic and political progress of their countries compared with other countries. So a lot of comparison to see who's doing what and who's doing it well. As I mentioned before, comparative education is interdisciplinary, incorporating theoretical and methodological approaches from disciplines such as economics, anthropology, sociology, and political science. So on the right, you'll see international education. International education is a practical field that encompasses international schools, educational exchange, multicultural education, and ideals of social justice, as well as international development. And it's commonly thought of as a practical component of comparativist work. Malcolm McKenzie, 1998, contends that even international education and international school have become so muddled that they're used interchangeably. And so he suggests that there are multiple meanings for international education, which really doesn't help the fact that we're trying to define these twin fields, right? And yet, although international education is being pulled in so many directions, there's a common thread among these strands of international education. UNESCO's language in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other documents that discuss education, especially education for international understanding, has painted a picture of international education that illustrates a dedication to social justice, equity, human rights, respect, and cooperation among nations. While Robert Leestma, 1969, conceptualizes international education as any educational output that reduces ethnocentrism. So that's pretty interesting. And these values are inherent to international education endeavors, which ultimately serve to solve social problems within and between nations. Comparison is a critical element of the field, but is it a unique feature of CIE? Now, this is a question that's also hotly debated within the field, but it's something we naturally do when making decisions. Should I choose this or this? Which one's better? However, according to Carlos Oliveira, comparison in the general sense is distinct from the comparative discipline. So the discipline is different. The comparative discipline involves comparing empirically observable data from two comparable objects. So we're not comparing apples to oranges, we're comparing apples to apples or oranges to oranges, rather than simply comparing just two or more objects, like I said. Some scholars identify comparison as one of the unique features of this field, but I tend to disagree. While it does define the field, it's not unique to the field, as there are many other comparative fields such as comparative law, comparative literature, and comparative sociology. but that's just my opinion. So how did the two fields come together? That is pretty important. According to Alexander Wiseman and Emily Anderson, some scholars say the two fields started to come together to form comparative and international education around the 19th and 20th centuries, while others believe it didn't really become a field until the 50s. And this is around the same time that the field's own scholarly journal started to be published. One defining moment for the field was in 1968 when the Comparative Education Society changed their name to the Comparative and International Education Society, and I quote, "to indicate the more global nature of the organization." Wiseman and Matherly, 2009. Although this is still a hotly contested move, nevertheless, CIE was cemented as more of a legitimate field, although since then, scholars have been kind of working retroactively to justify and defend its legitimacy after the fact. Additionally, an annual review of the field has been part of the field's increasing legitimization. Wiseman and Anderson 2013 make the case that annual review is necessary for scholars and practitioners of the field to discuss common goals and to determine whether the field is meeting those goals. In fact, it's vital for the professionalization of the field. So now that you know the basics about the field, what do CIE scholars and practitioners do? So most scholars of CIE analyze the policies and trends in education and do critical research by gathering qualitative and quantitative data. This research is often used to help policymakers in education make more informed decisions at the practical level. So an example would be if policymakers in the United States wanted to improve aspects of the educational system there. If they decided to look at the Finnish educational system, for example, just because of a perceived superiority based on standardized testing and how well they're doing, they would look at factors such as the cultural and historical context of the countries. And so the researchers in comparative international education would allow policymakers to make informed decisions as to whether to borrow these Finnish policies in the first place. So it's a really important area of research because if policymakers adopt the wrong policies out of context, it could have many social and economic consequences both inside and outside of education. So many people in the field go on to become government officials, officers in development programs, education policymakers, scientists in research institutes, and they also work in NGOs and within schools. So now a pressing question: what will be the future of comparative and international education? So whether the field will become ever more professionalized is unclear. However, I do believe that the field is growing and will be increasingly important due to globalization and the global nature of education in general. But on that note, I believe something that we have to come to terms with as scholars of CIE is that we need to reframe the narrative of comparative and international education as a field with intentional differences rather than accidental differences for which we must try to find excuses for, and explain. As I mentioned before, comparative and international education is often portrayed as a haphazard pile of theories and methods applied to international education that must find its own unique approach. But on the contrary, what makes the field unique is its flexibility in using the tools for the job, right? By reframing the narrative of comparative and international education, the field becomes an asset rather than, some confused pile of theories. But if you're interested in a CIE program, I recommend these programs, checking out these schools. There are some degrees out there that offer studies in just comparative education or just international education as well if you're interested in that, but I decided to put a couple from the United States that are both comparative and international education. I would also recommend reading this book. I don't know if it looks like it's not twisted. There we go. Comparative and International Education, Introduction to Theory, Method, and Practice by David Phillips and Michelle Sweisworth. It's a really good introduction to the field if you're interested. So there you have it. There's a brief introduction to the field of comparative and international education. I hope you enjoyed it, and be sure to share this video with anyone who might be curious of the field or who would like to learn a little bit about it. Thanks and have a great day!